The restaurant was dimly lit, its warm golden glow casting soft shadows over the crisp white tablecloths. A hush of anticipation hung in the air as waiters glided between tables with practiced precision. At one corner booth sat Ethan Carter, a man who seemed more at home in boardrooms than blind dates. His sharp suit screamed power and control, his cold demeanor matching the frosty winter evening outside. He wasn't here for himself. He never would be. It was all for his best friend, Daniel, who had begged him to take this favor seriously. "Just go, Ethan," Daniel had pleaded earlier that week. "She's perfect for you." Ethan scoffed at the memory now, swirling the ice cubes in his glass, absent-mindedly. Love, perfect match. Those weren't words he associated with his life. Yet here he was, waiting for some stranger chosen by someone else. Ethan wasn't what most people called approachable. As the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company, he lived in a world of numbers, strategies, and calculated risks. Emotions were messy variables he avoided at all costs. But tonight, emotions felt unavoidable. Every tick of the clock on the Tabza wall echoed louder than it should have, stretching out the seconds until she walked through those doors. Who was she? What kind of person agreed to meet a complete stranger like this? And why did Daniel think they'd click? Ethan shook his head slightly, brushing off the thought. This was just dinner, nothing more. Then, the door opened. The sound of it barely registered above the low hum of conversation, but Ethan's eyes shot up instinctively. She stepped inside, her presence immediately drawing attention, not because she was flashy or loud, but because there was something quietly magnetic about her. Her long coat looked worn, her scarf hand-knitted, and her boots scuffed from countless winters. She scanned the room hesitantly, clutching a small bag close to her chest. When their eyes met, Ethan froze. Something shifted in the atmosphere around them. Subtle, yet undeniable. For a moment, time stood still. Her name was Clara Bennett, though Ethan wouldn't learn that until later. To him, she was simply captivating. There was no other word for it. Her dark hair framed a face that carried traces of exhaustion, but also an unshakable warmth. Her cheeks flushed slightly when she realized he was staring, and she offered a shy smile before making her way toward him. Every step she took seemed deliberate, as if she was steeling herself for whatever came next. Ethan watched her intently, trying to reconcile the image of the woman walking toward him with the idea of someone Daniel might set him up with. They couldn't be more different. His tailored suit versus her thrift store coat, his penthouse, apartment versus wherever she called home. And yet, there was something about her that intrigued him beyond reason. "Hi," Clara said softly once she reached the table, her voice tinged with nervousness. "Are you Ethan?" He nodded, standing up briefly out of habit. "Yes, and you must be Clara," she supplied quickly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I hope I'm not late." "No, not at all," Ethan replied, gesturing for her to sit. His tone was polite but distant, the same polished professionalism he used in meetings. Yet beneath the surface, his mind raced. Why did Daniel pick her? Was this some sort of joke? Or maybe she really was supposed to be here. As they began talking, Clara revealed pieces of herself, bit by bit. She was a graduate, student working 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet while pursuing a degree in education. Her passion for teaching shone through every word, even when discussing the challenges of balancing work and school. Ethan listened intently, finding himself oddly drawn to her resilience. Here was someone who didn't have the luxuries he often took for granted, a steady income, a safety net, but who radiated determination and kindness nonetheless. For Clara, meeting Ethan felt surreal. From the moment she saw him sitting there, exuding confidence and authority, she knew they existed in vastly different worlds. But instead of feeling intimidated, she found herself wanting to understand him better. Beneath the polished exterior, she sensed a layer of guardedness, almost as if he were hiding behind a carefully constructed wall. She wondered what, or who, had put it there. Their conversation flowed surprisingly well, despite their differences, each question revealing new layers to their personalities. By the time dessert arrived, Clara realized she hadn't laughed so freely in months. But as the evening wore on, Ethan struggled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he admired Clara's authenticity and strength. On the other, he couldn't shake the nagging voice in his head, reminding him of how impractical any connection between them would be. He thrived in a world of logic and order, where decisions were made based on data and outcomes. Falling for someone like Clara, a poor student with dreams bigger than her circumstances, didn't fit into his neatly organized life. Yet try as he might, he couldn't ignore the pull he felt toward her. Just as the check arrived, Clara hesitated, fumbling with her wallet. "Let me cover my half," she insisted, her pride evident in her tone. "No," Ethan interjected firmly, placing his card on the tray. "It's taken care of. I can't let you do that," she protested, her cheeks reddening. "It's already done," he said simply, his expression unreadable. They left the restaurant together, the chilly air snapping against their skin. Neither wanted the night to end, though neither dared say it aloud. As they stood under the flickering street lamp outside, Clara glanced up at him, her breath visible in the cold. "Thank you for tonight," she murmured. "I wasn't sure what to expect, but I'm glad we met." Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on her face. "So am I," he admitted, surprising even himself. Before either could say more, a sleek black car pulled up beside them. Ethan recognized it instantly. It belonged to his driver. Reality crashed back down, reminding him of the gulf between their lives. Clara noticed the car too, her smile faltering ever so slightly. "You're leaving?" she asked, her voice tinged with disappointment. "Yes," Ethan replied, reluctant to step away. "But," he hesitated, unsure of what to say next. The driver got out to open the door. Clara gave him a small wave. "Goodbye, Ethan." "Wait," he called after her, stepping forward instinctively. But before he could finish his sentence, she turned and started walking away, disappearing into the crowd. Standing there alone, Ethan felt a pang of regret, and something else he couldn't quite name. Back in the car, he stared out the window, replaying the night in his mind. Who was Clara Bennett, really? And why did she leave such an indelible mark on him after just a few hours? One thing was certain, this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days that followed were unlike any Ethan had experienced before. For a man who prided himself on control, he found himself thinking about Clara constantly. Her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her students, the quiet determination in her voice. It unsettled him. He tried to push her out of his mind, convincing himself it was just the novelty of meeting someone so different from his usual circle. But no matter how many meetings he attended or contracts he reviewed, Clara lingered like an unanswered question. Meanwhile, Clara's life continued, much as it always had, juggling classes, grading papers late into the night, and working shifts at the cafe near campus. Yet something had shifted for her too. That evening with Ethan felt surreal now, almost dreamlike. She couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her under the street lamp, his hesitation as they said goodbye, There was vulnerability in him she hadn't expected, hidden beneath the polished exterior. But she reminded herself not to read too much into it. Men like Ethan didn't belong in worlds like hers. Still, she couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if she'd stayed a little longer. Ethan's attempts to move on hit a wall when Daniel called him later that week. "So, how did it go?" Daniel asked eagerly, leaning back in his chair during their video call. "It went fine," Ethan replied curtly, avoiding eye contact as he shuffled papers on his desk. "Fine?" Daniel repeated, clearly unimpressed. "Come on, man, don't give me that. Did you even talk to her? Was there chemistry? Tell me everything." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's interesting, smart, passionate, very different from anyone I've ever met. And," Daniel pressed, sensing there was more. "And nothing," Ethan snapped, though the edge in his tone betrayed him. It was one dinner, Daniel. Let it go. But letting it go wasn't easy, not for either of them. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself driving past the cafe where Clara worked, telling himself it was just coincidence. Each time, he caught glimpses of her through the window, laughing with customers, pouring coffee, scribbling notes in a worn notebook during slow moments. Once their eyes met briefly, and Ethan felt his pulse quicken. He wanted to go inside, to say hello, but pride held him back. What would he even say? "Hi, remember me? The guy who let you walk away without explaining why." Clara noticed him too, or at least she thought she did. The dark car parked across the street seemed familiar, though she couldn't be sure. Part of her hoped it was Ethan, while another part scolded herself for being foolish. Why would someone like him care about someone like her? She had enough problems without adding unrealistic fantasies to the mix. Still, late at night when she lay awake staring at the ceiling, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to see him again, to hear his deep voice, steady and reassuring, to feel the warmth of his presence, even if only for a moment. As weeks passed, tensions in Ethan's life began to mount. Work was demanding as always. But now there was an added layer of distraction. His board members grew increasingly frustrated with his lack of focus, accusing him of losing sight of priorities. "You've built this empire with precision," one of them said sternly during a tense meeting. "Don't let personal distractions derail everything you've worked for." Ethan clenched his jaw, refusing to explain that he wasn't distracted. He was confused. For the first time in years, he questioned whether success meant anything, if it left him feeling empty. At the same time, Clara faced challenges of her own. Her scholarship funds were running low, forcing her to take on extra hours at the cafe. Exhaustion became a constant companion, and the stress of balancing work and school weighed heavily on her shoulders. One particularly rough day, after receiving yet another rejection letter for a grant application, she sat alone in her tiny apartment, tears streaming down her face. She felt defeated, overwhelmed by the enormity of the obstacles in front of her. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, her landlord knocked on the door, reminding her that rent was overdue. Unbeknownst to both of them, fate had other plans. On a rainy afternoon, Clara rushed into the library to escape the downpour, shaking droplets from her coat. As she wandered between shelves, searching for a quiet corner to study, she collided with someone turning the corner. Books tumbled to the floor, and she bent down quickly to gather them. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, looking up, and froze. Standing in front of her was Ethan, holding one of the fallen books. His suit was slightly damp, his tie loosened around his collar, and his expression mirrored her shock. "What are you doing here?" They both blurted out simultaneously, then laughed nervously. I could ask you the same thing, Clara said, standing up and brushing off her hands. I needed some peace and quiet, Ethan admitted, gesturing vaguely toward the rows of books. Work has been chaotic, Clara nodded, understanding all too well. I know the feeling. Life hasn't exactly been calm for me either. They ended up sitting together at a small table near the window, talking for hours. This time, the conversation flowed effortlessly, stripped of the awkwardness of their first meeting. They shared stories about their childhoods, Ethan growing up in privilege, but lacking emotional connection. Clara raised by a single mother who taught her the value of hard work and resilience. They discovered common ground in unexpected places, finding solace in each other's company. By the time they left the library, neither wanted to say goodbye. Over the following weeks, Ethan and Clara began seeing each other regularly, sneaking stolen moments whenever they could. Their relationship blossomed quietly, away from prying eyes and judgmental whispers. Ethan introduced Clara to art galleries and rooftop dinners, while she showed him the beauty of simple pleasures, picnics in the park, second-hand bookstores, and sunsets by the river. Slowly, Ethan's walls started to crumble, replaced by a newfound sense of vulnerability, and Clara, despite her reservations, found herself falling for him in ways she never imagined possible. But happiness came with complications. Rumors about Ethan's frequent absences reached the boardroom, sparking concern among shareholders. Meanwhile, Clara struggled with guilt. Knowing her financial situation made their future uncertain. Could they really bridge the gap between their worlds? Or would reality tear them apart? One evening, as they strolled along the waterfront, Ethan stopped suddenly, turning to face Clara. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice unusually serious. Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I've been offered a position overseas. It's a huge opportunity. For the company, for my career. But, she prompted softly, already dreading the answer. "But I don't know if I can leave you behind," he confessed, his gaze piercing hers. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, leaving Clara speechless. This was the moment she'd feared, the collision of dreams and realities, of love and ambition. As the waves lapped against the shore, the silence between them stretched endlessly, charged with unspoken fears and desires. Clara stared at Ethan, her mind racing as the enormity of his words sank in. Leave her behind. The thought sent a pang through her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Overseas?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Ethan replied, his eyes searching hers for some sign of understanding. "It's London. A 3-year commitment, maybe longer. It could redefine my career, open doors I've been chasing for years." "And us?" Clara pressed, though she already knew the answer. Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I don't know. That's why I'm telling you now, before anything is finalized. I need to know if we're worth fighting for." The question hung between them like an invisible thread, fragile yet unbreakable. Clara looked away, focusing on the shimmering water reflecting the city lights. How could she ask him to give up something so monumental for her? And how could she possibly follow him, knowing her own dreams were tethered to a life far removed from his world? Yet, the idea of letting him go felt unbearable. "I can't ask you to stay," Clara said finally, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "And I can't promise I can come with you. My life, it's here. My studies, my work, everything I've fought for." She trailed off, unable to finish. I understand, Ethan said softly, though his tone betrayed the turmoil beneath. But what about us? Do we just let it end? For a long moment, neither spoke. The distant hum of traffic and the gentle lapping of waves filled the silence. Then Clara took a deep breath, turning to face him. What if it doesn't have to be over? She asked, surprising even herself. What if we find a way to make it work? Not just for today, but for tomorrow too. Her words ignited something in Ethan. A spark of hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. He reached for her hand, holding it firmly. Then tell me what that looks like. Tell me how we do this without losing ourselves. Or each other. Their conversation stretched late into the night, mapping out possibilities neither had dared consider until now. They talked about compromises, sacrifices, and the courage it would take to build a future together, despite their differences. By the time they parted ways, exhaustion etched on their faces, but determination blazing in their hearts. They had made a decision. They would try. No matter the challenges ahead, they owed it to themselves and to the connection they shared to see where love might lead. In the weeks that followed, Ethan made arrangements to split his time between London and home, leveraging technology to manage his responsibilities remotely. It wasn't easy. The board was skeptical, and the logistics were daunting. But Ethan refused to back down, driven by the belief that success meant nothing without someone to share it with. Meanwhile, Clara threw herself into her studies with renewed purpose, securing a teaching internship at a prestigious school that aligned perfectly with her goals. Though the distance tested them both, their commitment never wavered. Months later, standing on the rooftop of a high-rise, overlooking the glittering skyline, Ethan held Clara close as fireworks exploded overhead. "Happy anniversary," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. 6 months apart and still going strong, Clara teased, leaning into him. Who would have thought? "It's not about the miles," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's about choosing each other every single day." As they stood there, wrapped in the glow of celebration and the promise of a future built on trust and sacrifice, Clara realized something profound. Love wasn't about finding someone perfect or avoiding hardship. It was about embracing imperfection and facing challenges head-on, together. For Ethan, the lesson was equally transformative. True wealth wasn't measured in dollars or titles, but in the connections that gave life meaning. Their journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't always smooth. There were moments of doubt, days when the weight of their choices threatened to overwhelm them. But through it all, they clung to the belief that love was worth fighting for, that no obstacle was insurmountable when two people were willing to meet halfway. As the story of Ethan and Clara unfolded, it became clear that their bond transcended circumstances. From the cold CEO who stumbled into a blind date to the poor student girl with dreams bigger than her struggles, theirs was a tale of resilience, vulnerability, and the power of choosing love against all odds. And as their lives intertwined, they proved that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the deepest connections, the kind that change not only who we are, but who we aspire to become.